tehničko pitanje. Tko u prostoriji ne govori engleski jezik? Znači, svi možete... Dakle, imamo u prvom redu je cijenjena prevoditeljica, tako da bez ikakvog srama ovdje ima 3-4 slobodna mjesta, svi koji možda se neće osjećati sigurnima, pridružite se, imat ćete privatni prijevod ako treba i molim vas da to onda učinite ponovno bez srama što prije da možemo početi. Hvala vam.
Kao ja.
Dakle, još jednom, prije svega, dobra večer, Ece. Good evening.
Dobro večer. Dobro večer.
Hvala. I will start in Croatian just to introduce you for a couple of sentences. Prije svega, puno hvala Nakladi Ljevak što je hrvatskoj publici prije čini mi se 6 godina otkrila tu, pa ne mogu naći bolju i jednostavno reći nego ljepotu kojom piše Ece Temelkuran. Pred nama je knjiga Kako ostati bez domovine, 7 koraka od demokracije do diktature, koja je dobila puno globalnih pozitivnih kritika, ali mislim da je kritika koju ćete dati kada pročitate ovu knjigu biti nešto što ćete sami nositi sa sobom, zbog toga što je recimo mene osobno ovo ubolo na puno važnih mjesta od mozga do srca. So, Ece, welcome to your second hometown, because many of the people don't know that you live in Zagreb.
Yeah, I live in Zagreb, and this feels like living, giving a speech in my living room, so it's a little bit weird, because I normally don't do events here, but in other countries, in other cities, and I always consider this, this city, Zagreb, as home. So you don't give speeches, like perform in your own living room. So it's a, interesting feeling.
We can do deduction or induction today with this book, but for me it's very interesting that we are sitting in the hall that is called Brussels, and we are on the soil of this construction which is called European Union. So in one place, which was London, in 2016 after the coup in Turkey, you were asked by one of the colleagues on the panel, after they were very empathetic towards the feelings of people of Turkey being through the coup, she asked you, what can I do for you? And that was basically the starting point for you to start with this book. Can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sorry. This is, that story is in the introduction. I wrote another book, which is called Turkey, the Insane and Melancholy. And somehow, I'm normally not that lucky, but somehow the publication date of that book overlapped with the military coup attempt in Turkey in 2016. So I was in London after the military coup attempt, and of course, everybody was wondering about Turkey, what's happening in Turkey, and so on and so forth. So the book caught a lot of media attention and so on. And one of the events was in Frontline Club. It's a journalistic club in London. And I told about what happened during the coup, what we have been through, and how horrible things are in Turkey and so on. And this feeling that they normally live, mostly live in Western European countries, like as if they are the civilized world and the rest of the world is like barbarian. So the lady, with all the good intention, asked me, so what can we do for you? And ironically, this was the time when Brexit was happening, and also it was the time when Trump came to power. So I asked her, actually, what can I do for you? Because you're not in the completely better situation than we are. And then on, actually, it was almost heartbreaking to watch the same things happening in Turkey, same things happening in Europe that happened in Turkey 15 years ago. It was almost watching a film for the second time, this time in a bigger screen of American politics or European politics. And each time when a statement was made by Nigel Farage in London, or Trump in the United States, or several other right-wing leaders in Europe, I was unescapably reminded by with, you know, Mr. Erdogan's statements that happened 15 years ago. So I thought, since I am on the periphery of Europe, as if standing in a mountain where you can see both sides, Turkey and Europe and Western, you know, democracies, I can tell them what had happened in Turkey, how it escalated, and how it was exactly the same in the beginning, like it is now in Europe or in the United States, and then call them to some sort of solidarity, in a way. Because I do believe that this is a global phenomenon. Every country lives right-wing populism or this political insanity, moral insanity, as if it is the first time it happened to them, and as if they are unique and they have to find a unique solution to overcome this problem. But actually it's a political, global political current, a moral current as well. So we have to come up with a global solution and a political solution, of course.
Let's name these 7 things and then we'll go through it in very detail. What are these 7 things?
You know, when I look at Turkey and when I look at all the European countries that are subjected to this, you know, certain type of political insanity, you call it whatever you want. You can call it right-wing populism, you can call it rising authoritarianism, and you can also call it neo-fascism. And when I look at all these countries, there are actually 7 common global patterns. Each country has its own unique confusions, sensitive issues, complicated history, completely unique backstory, and so on and so forth. But there are 7 common global patterns when we look at the phenomena. And it is first, these movements come to the political stage by saying that they are not a party, they're not a political party, but they are a political movement. And that word, movement, promises some sort of energizing concept and some sort of, it makes a mobilizing effect on the masses. And then they ask for respect. And then they, you know, this is the first step. And then the second step, and another common pattern, is they dismantle the rationale and they terrorize the conversation. I'm sure all of you would remember at least an incident when I tell you that, you know, it is almost impossible to speak to those people who wears ignorance and ruthlessness as a badge of honor. Nowadays there are people who think that the world is flat. They are, you know, proudly saying that they believe that the world is flat. So, and it doesn't matter if you show them the picture of the planet and say that it is round, because they make a very interesting statement saying that, well, you can, you know, show me that picture until the end of time, but I do believe otherwise, and then you have to respect me. And then this dismantles the entire conversation. This paralyzes the basic human reasoning, and it is an anti-science, anti-reason, you know, loop that you're getting into. This is what they do in political sphere as well. They dismantle the political debate, and it becomes impossible to have a debate because they dismiss the basics, you know, consensus of political debate. They dismiss the basic consensuses of democracy and so on. This is the second common pattern. And the third pattern, which I find really important, is shamelessness. There is a certain shameless, ruthless attitude to these right-wing populists, which everywhere in the world creates the same reaction from the opposition. And you ask yourself, how can they be so cruel? How can they be so ruthless? How can they be so shameless? It is as if they wear shamelessness as a badge of honor. And recently, we have seen this, you know, in Trump's case, in Boris Johnson's case, and so on and so forth. Boris Johnson was not retreating when he was, for instance, a few days ago in British Parliament saying that all the Labour Party members are actually surrenderists, they're actually gobsmacked and so on, you know, gobsmacked, I'm sorry. Whatever that word is.
Humbats, considering the assassination of Joe Cox, which was another dimension of immorality with how you call it.
He called a dead woman, he made a slur against a dead woman. So it is beyond our consensus of basic morality. And they do this as if to encourage their followers to follow their lead. So actually they're creating this incredible hostility, incredible violence, and they are encouraging their supporters to be this group of shameless people who are asking for respect for their shamelessness. So this is, I'm of course saying very vaguely, roughly. These are very long topics, but yeah, this is the third one. And the fourth one is dismantling the judicial and political mechanisms. This comes after right-wing populists seize the power. As soon as they seize the power, what they do is actually to start dismantling the judicial and political mechanisms that make democracy possible. And fifth one is let them laugh, the chapter title is Let Them Laugh at Your Horrors. It is political humor. In every country, when there is right-wing populism, emerges, there is this amazing, flourishing political humor. We love to laugh at Boris Johnson, we love to laugh at Trump and his, their kind. But then that laughter, although it operates as a political tool in the beginning, it operates to calm our anxieties and to, energize our political, political views. After a while, it makes us numb, and actually, it starts operating as a shelter that is too comfortable to go out from. So there is a danger in political humor, and we see this in the opposition in every country where there is where right-wing populism is on the rise. And the sixth common pattern is designing your own ideal citizen. Mostly it is, this is mostly done through women. Somehow, all over the world, political leaders, political projects consider women like Play-Dohs. They always start with women. They dress them up, they strip them down, they put them in a certain position, they put them in a certain role. Somehow they think that women can be changed, can be transformed in order to become the ideal role models of the new regime overnight. So right-wing populism starts with women as well. And it starts with a direct attack on their body through abortion rights, through other things, and finally any country actually can end up like Turkey, where women killings have skyrocketed in the last 10 years. The hostility against women is one of the common patterns, and I try to explain why it is so in the book. And the last common pattern is designing your own country. It is always very clear from the beginning, actually, from day one, that it's going to be like that at the end, but we somehow wool gather, we somehow choose not to accept the fact, but from the very beginning, they start otherization of certain groups, creating mild hostility towards minorities and so on and so forth. But at the end, it comes to designing their own ideal citizen and leaving out all the other citizens out of the ideal citizen circle, which makes them traitors, deplorables, dismissibles, and finally they can also be, outside the country. They can be exiled, they can be imprisoned, they can be whatever. So these are, like, it seems classical, but we are seeing this pattern appearing in a completely different way in today's world. And this is why I wanted to write this book, because there is a certain reluctance in mainstream media in Western countries they don't want to name this, and they want to treat this phenomenon as if it's a passing by thing. It's going to be okay if we, only if we can get rid of Trump. it will be okay if we can get rid of Boris Johnson.
And you're right, I'm sorry to interrupt you, about the narrative of this, let's say, political correctness that we are experiencing, not naming this kind of things also.
Exactly. We are, thanks to the identity politics of 1990s, we learned to be very, very polite. And we think that respect is something close to muteness. You cannot question what you respect, is it? And this misconception of identity politics of 1990s, I think, brought us here, where we cannot really question the political convictions of people, even though those political convictions are utterly stupid and totally fascist.
Your writing and your style is kind of, you start mellow, and then you hit. And then you start mellow, and then you put
what
us,
I do in life too.
yeah, you put us in like in a whirlpool, and then all the questions that we have basically for ourselves every day, being, I don't know, in media, being citizens, participating in something that we call democracy, or just, people who debate on social media, you can see like a dictionary of things that are going on around us. I'm going just to read one short quote. U srpnju 2017. golema se santa odlomila od Antarktike. Informativni programi nekoliko su dana prikazivali snježno bijelo čudovište kako ležavno pluta. Bio je to veličanstveni admiralski brod našega doba koji šapuće se krana diljem svijeta na jeziku škripava leda. Ovo je završna faza doba dezintegracije. Sve što čvrsto stoji, odlomit će se. Sve će se raspasti na dijeliće. Nije to bila sablast, nego opipljivo čudovište koje pripovijeda priču našeg vremena. Da od najvećeg do najmanjeg entiteta na planetu Zemlji ništa neće ostati onakvim kakvim ga poznajemo. Osipaju se Ujedinjeni narodi, to golemo, impotentno tijelo stvoreno kako bi čuvalo mir u svijetu, dok se najmanja jedinica, duša, raspada kao nikada prije. Jedna sekunda može se podijeliti na stoljeća, tijekom kojih nekolicina bogatih priprema nezagađene životne prostore kako bi živjeli dulje, dok deseci tisuće djece u Jemenu umire od kolere, bolesti koja potječe od prije 20. stoljeća. Santa je njemo vrištala. Centar se ne drži. Talking about creating a movement in your dictionary, you have some great points that you've made. Fragile me, opposite the question of what is that we, something that you called the real people, or the right folk, if we use the terminology from the 20th century. And you also point out the problem of something that you call mainstream intelligence. I don't know if you call it the left, citizens that are basically being nice and they tolerate the differences, but how is it articulated, the movement that we are witnessing? Maybe you can tell a story about your grandmother here, because for me it's very illustrative when she asked you, or someone calling me a fascist.
Yeah. Yeah, my grandmother was really moved, was shaken when she heard that she was a fascist all her life. Every country has its own narratives, own, sensitive issues, as I told before, own contradicting stories, problems that they didn't solve, they don't want to solve it, they just blanket it, and put it in the deep freezer. So one of the things that this regime in Turkey did was to bring out all these things and to capitalize on these manufactured hostilities, let's say. They said that from the very beginning, there was a secular elite in Turkey, and they oppressed the real people of Turkey who were actually Muslims, and they couldn't practice their religion. And this elite, they pictured this elite with this really primitive, pejorative, descriptions, saying that, oh, they drink whiskey, they have dogs, and they always dye their hair, as if this, old stupid movies or cartoon movies where the evil woman is always, looking evil. So my grandmother started teaching in the village schools, village elementary schools when she was 16. And she always had a hard life, and she always dedicated her life to her students even more than her children. So when AKP came to power, all the TV programs, all the TV political debates were full of these guys who were blaming these, secular elite, which is, teachers, academics, journalists, politicians, and so on, engineers, whoever is educated is elite. They blame them for being oppressive and humiliating towards, the real people of Turkey. So all of a sudden, my grandmother started asking, am I a fascist now? Why am I a fascist? What is fascist now, all of a sudden? Is it something different than I know? And it created a big amount of tension within the social sphere. And it became politicized, of course, but the social sphere became terrorized with this, division that was manufactured by the political narrative. Maybe it is this kind of, description, this kind of description does not have a place in political life of the country, but it should have. So many hearts are broken in Turkey. Because all of a sudden, there's a project that is established in 1923 with the Republic of Turkey. And then there are generations who devoted their lives to certain ideals, like enlightening the country, giving everything you have to the people, teaching the people, or making the country better, and so on. And all of a sudden, there's a political movement who says that, okay, you are redundant, this project is no more, so you're not needed anymore. You are just useless to our new project, so you can go away, you can stay home and keep silent. It's just, you're not needed anymore, and if you start speaking loud, there is going to be a, real hostility towards you. This is, among being other things, like discriminative, humiliating, so many things, and it also affects you financially as well, economically as well. But above all those things, it's very, very heartbreaking. A certain percentage of the population in Turkey was heartbroken, actually, after this, including me, because I am also somewhat the fruit of a secular Republican project. As many friends are, even though we are criticizing that project, we are the fruit of that project. So it is really heartbreaking. You want to do a lot for your country, and then they say, no, 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 we don't like you, and we don't need your love either. It's like a unreciprocated, it is a one-way love, sort of. It is quite heartbreaking.
You detected some two elements, basically, that are emerging through that. One you mentioned, that real people ask for respect, and the other one is some kind of fake victimization of them until that point they are kind of taking over the public space.
Well, we have to accept that right-wing populism is a phenomenon that is rising from the collapse of neoliberalism. This is a moment of crisis. The old is dying and the new is not born. And as Gramsci said, there are some morbid symptoms when the old is dead and the new is not born. So we are going through that period. Democracy, as we know it in the 20th century, is collapsing. International and national bodies are collapsing entities. And neoliberalism is collapsing. It's not me saying it, it is the people in Davos, it's IMF, it's World Bank, all the reports say that it's not sustainable and it's coming to an end. So right-wing populism is a phenomenon that have risen from that. It's emerged from that chaos, from that crisis. So there is a real victimhood. There is of course we know that there's real victimhood because there is no social justice in today's democracies, and that's why they're collapsing anyway. And we lost our triangulation point, one of the most important triangulation points, and it was human dignity. And so on and so forth. So there's a crisis and there's a real victimhood, so, extreme inequality, and also due to the climate crisis and other things, wars and so on, there's this immigration, you know, there's real victimhood. But the real political power of right-wing populism does not come from that real victimhood, but the manufactured victimhood. One of the common patterns of right-wing populism in every country is these right-wing populist leaders talk about pride. They always talk about pride and how our pride is broken, how we're going to mend it, and how we're going to be great again. This somehow affects people because their dignity is broken, because this system is promoting indignity, and it's stealing away the dignity from people. Although these two words, pride and dignity, they sound very much alike, they're actually completely different from each other. Pride is a word that invites hostility, violence, and vengeance, and so on. Whereas human dignity invites love, you know, embracing, it's an embracing word, and it invites justice as well. Unfortunately, this broken dignity is now politicized by the right-wing populists through the word of pride. And it is a very dangerous thing, and this is one of the countries where people would know it best, how dangerous it can get.
Before we talk about another thing that is problematic and which you detect very well, and this is kind of attack on human reason, before we go on to the morale, I would like to ask my colleague Peja Bajovic to help me read.
Ah, yeah, Aristo.
Yes.
Aristo going crazy.
So you can tell us what we are going to read now.
You know, for years I had to watch these TV debates, politicians, right-wing politicians with their, you know, this dominating and patronizing smile, and the other guys, the opposition, going completely crazy, feeling helpless, and so on. And at some point I thought I have to decipher it, what's happening here, the main logic behind all this, you know, repeating insanity. So I came up with this fictitious dialogue between Aristo and right-wing populists. So Aristo is saying, you know,